John McKinnon covers taxes for the Wall Street Journal down in Washington, D.C. And suddenly he's an optimist. In a very interesting piece, he says, guess what? It's not a matter of if there's big tax reform, but when. John, did you actually write that piece, or am I putting words in your mouth?
I've come around. I've begun to believe. I think this is the time, or at least, the end of this year and next year are the time.
So now we spoke a couple of weeks ago and you were a little less optimistic than you seem to be right now. So what has happened? Who have you spoken to, and what did they tell you that suddenly makes you a believer in at least big corporate tax reform? You said the Democrats may not be on board for individual tax reform, but certainly for corporate tax reform they are.
Well, I think that the Obama administration coming out with a plan that they did last week really pushes the ball a long way down the field, and they're clearly showing signals of real interest in getting this done at some point. Now, whether it can actually come to pass in the context that the Republicans are looking for, it's still up in the air. I mean, the extent of tax reform is still up in the air.
Right. And when it comes to extent matters, because as you point out in your piece, 70,000 pages, the U.S. tax code, 70,000 pages. I mean, yeah. that wasn't a misprint that I read.
Yeah, that's it. It's in the millions in terms of words. So there's a lot to cover. But basically, the Republicans are saying there's just no way you can do it without doing everything all at once, and that's the real issue at this point. Will Democrats be willing to cross the line and deal with all of the individual tax issues that they don't like to face up to? And the main ones are the progressivity. In the U.S., it's actually fairly high. In other words, higher income people pay pretty high rates, and low income people basically pay nothing. And so, I mean, that's where the two sides are really far apart.
Right, and it's important that there is, at least from the Republican point of view, it's important that the corporate tax reform is done hand in hand with individual tax reform, because you do have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of individuals who file as businesses, right? Small and medium-sized businesses that file as individuals, right? They're not just corporations.
Yeah, and right now those people have, it's in some dispute, but right now those people basically have a slight tax advantage over taxable corporations. In other words, if you're doing business as an LLC or an S corporation, you have somewhat of a tax advantage over a traditional taxable corporation. Now, and so that advantage is slowly being eroded, and it could really start to erode a lot if you just lowered the corporate tax rate.
Now, John, how can you possibly be optimistic when, as you've noted, there are 70,000 pages of U.S. tax code, and of that, each and every page is full of vested interests who are vested in that one of 70,000 pages. I mean, it is the way it is for a reason, isn't it?
Yeah. The ultimate reason is that the most important vested interest in all of this is the vested interest of Congress. And Congress, I think, is coming around to the view that they have to do something on the tax system in order to protect all of their own interests. They have to raise more money to protect all of their spending programs in particular. But I think they also are beginning to recognize that the economy needs this, and that's another way to raise more money to protect all of their programs. If they can boost economic growth through some kind of tax reform, then that's more money in the till to pay for their programs.
Final question, John. Who should we be looking to? If by early next year your optimism turns out to be justified, who in Congress will be leading the charge here? And can this be done without the President of the United States, be it a Democrat or Republican, leading the way?
You hear a lot that this can't get done without presidential leadership, and that's certainly been true in the past. President Reagan was a classic illustration of a president who really took that issue in hand and really pulled it himself across the finish line. But in this case, I just think it's going to be almost mandatory. There's so much in play now. The Bush tax cuts are expiring at the end of 2012. They have to be dealt with somehow. You've got the sequester of a lot of budgetary spending that also occurs at the end of 2012, beginning of 2013. If you don't do something different, you're going to have to cut a lot of programs. It's going to be forced on whoever is the president starting in 2013.
Well,